Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. Okay, Jeff, this is a sensitive topic. Today we're going to talk about workplace violence as it relates to workers' comp here in Kentucky. You're an attorney who's been practicing workers' comp a large part of your 30-year career. You understand this, you've seen this, and unfortunately these things tend to happen with increasing frequency. So let's unpack this for the audience and really kind of define what it is, and then kind of all these other topics that we want to really kind of break out as part of workplace violence.
Sure, and it is something that I've dealt with through my career. And basically what we're talking about with workplace violence, it can be, unfortunately, a variety of situations. What I've seen mostly in my career is situations where there's been physical altercations, a fight-type situation. During my career, I have represented a lot of police officers who've been injured on the job. A lot of times the injuries are a result of a struggle with someone they're trying to apprehend, and they may have an injury to the shoulder or some other type of injury as a result of that altercation, and then have a workers' compensation claim as a result of that. But you see also in convenience stores, can unfortunately have some violent situations like that occur. I don't see it as much, obviously, in Calloway County, but you can see these also in bar settings where there may be a bouncer there and somebody's getting, had too much to drink, a patron, and trying to get them out, and then a scuffle occurs and the bouncer get injured as a result of that situation. And then, unfortunately, and we see this more frequently, you can have even greater violence occur, such as, people working at convenience stores and robbers getting shot, things of that nature. So violence can be anything from a fight up to, unfortunately, somebody being killed as a result.
Fatality. Yeah. So it's wide ranging. It's much more. But somewhere there is an injury that is sustained, right? It's not just a shoving match where everybody walks away. There's not really a claim there necessarily. But when there's an injury, somebody gets shoved and falls down and sustains an injury or something.
Right.
Then we're talking about this.
Exactly. And a lot of times when people think about a work injury, they're not thinking about something that's intentional. And what we're talking about here is a lot of times intentional. And so those can come into play where people think, okay, this was the robber's fault. They come in and we got into the struggle, or they beat me up, or some other violent act occurred, and so they're at fault. This isn't really a workers' compensation claim.
You're thinking more criminal at that point, right?
More criminal,
that's what most people think.
From that standpoint, exactly. And there's one that I have resolved now, but where the guy was actually, he was at work, a maintenance person, and somebody, for whatever reason, don't really know why, because they didn't catch the person who did it, just hit him upside the head with a baseball bat. Wow. And so, but the person who hit him, it was intentional act on that part. And originally, my client didn't realize and didn't think anything about, this, my employer's workers' comp insurance should be taking care of my medical bills.
Right. And that's, unfortunately, that we miss out on things like this. And this is why I'm so glad we're talking about this, because, again, as an employee, you do have rights and you do have benefits that you deserve should something like this ever happen. And again, we all get caught up because in the headlines we see, it's a criminal issue. No, it's also a workers' comp issue. At least it is here in Kentucky, right?
It certainly can be. If you're on the job at the time that it occurs, then most likely it's going to be covered under workers' compensation in that setting. Now, there are certain situations where that it may not be covered. but those are rare occurrences. But the one that always pops in my mind is if violence occurs because something personal to the person. So if your work as a cashier at a convenience store, and you've got a jealous boyfriend, jealous girlfriend who's mad and comes in and injures you because of something that happened away from work, had absolutely no connection to work whatsoever. The workers' comp carrier very well may have a legitimate defense that had nothing to do with work, wasn't part of the course and scope of the employment, that was personal to you, and we shouldn't have to cover that.
It just happened to occur on company property, but it wasn't work related.
It wasn't related to the work situation, and so you can have that situation, but much more frequently it is it may not be necessarily specifically work related, like the client that was at work that the guy hit him with a bat. We have no idea why the guy hit him at the bat. We don't know who the guy was. So it may have been that he was mad at something the client did at work. It may have been that he thought my client was somebody else. We don't really know. But in that situation, it that is covered under and was covered under workers' compensation. So
Interesting. So again, this can be a coworker, this can be a non-coworker, such as just a patron, or unfortunately, if it is a personal relationship that's outside of the work, that could negate everything. But again, it's not just a coworker is what we're getting at.
correct. I mean, if it's a coworker situation, then it's going to be covered. If if a coworker gets mad for whatever reason and comes and beats somebody up and injures them, hopefully they're going to get fired and criminally charged. But also the person who's injured, medical bills and any lost income and permanent disability as a result of that will be covered under workers' compensation, or should be covered under workers' compensation in that setting. From that standpoint, the one difference is. If it's a coworker, your only claim is going to be the workers' compensation claim, because from that standpoint, if it is somebody else, then you could potentially have a case against that. If it's a patron, for instance, probably not going to recover any money in it because they're probably judgment proof, but you could potentially have a claim against somebody else. If it's a vendor, that's a different situation. If you've got a vendor who is there stocking, you work at a convenience store and a vendor there stocking, and he gets mad for whatever reason and has that history, and then not only the vendor themselves, but if the employer of that vendor that did that, if they had a history that they didn't check into and knew the guy had erratic behavior or had done that before and they didn't take steps to protect people, then you may have a civil suit against the employer of that person who committed that violent act against you, as well as the workers' compensation claim.
Let me deviate in the conversation just a minute, because a while back you brought up first responders. And, in episode 50, which is a couple episodes back, we talked about the fact that if, say, a police officer is involved with a scuffle, trying to arrest somebody, and there's physical contact, the PTSD that could result, maybe they've had to fire a weapon, maybe they've just gotten in a bad fight, and again, they're having trouble dealing with that. That is also covered under Kentucky's workers' comp system.
If the PTSD is a result of physical trauma, yes, and that's what that episode was completely about. From that, and that would be the same in regard to non-first responders. So if you're if you work at a convenience store and are robbed and physically injured or physical trauma, if you're shoved and pushed back in against a display case or whatever and have bruising, and or worse, but we're just going to say right now it's just bruising that goes away, but you have PTSD as a result of that. The PTSD is compensable in that situation. Now, if it is situation where they come in, they rob you, you give them the money, they leave, there's no physical trauma, there's obviously psychological trauma, but no physical trauma, then PTSD is not covered in that setting under Kentucky law.
Is that for all employees or just first responders? So
All
simply-
employees. That's
Really?
all employees. It ought to be changed in
Right,
regard
right.
to first
And that's
responders,
really-
if not everybody, but which is what that other episode was about.
Friends, if you find that shocking, please go back and listen to episode 50. I think you will be shocked and amazed, and there's some calls to legislators need to be made. I mean, this is just, I mean, that's a gaping hole in our system that, if somebody is having trouble and, dealing with something that happened at work, is work-related, because there was no physical contact, they're barred from a claim, and that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, correct. And go back and listen to that episode. I can't remember if it's 50 or 51.
Yeah, I think maybe 51.
From that standpoint, but yes, it is. That's something that needs to be changed significantly or quickly in this state, in my opinion. It should have been changed a long time ago.
Well, let me ask you this: if I'm a sales rep and maybe I'm out on the road, I'm doing business. I drive from different places, and obviously, if I get hurt on the job doing company business, I mean that's compensable. That there's a work comp claim there, but doesn't it get dicey as to whether or not I was actually doing work? So maybe that evening I decide to go to dinner somewhere, and maybe an altercation happens. Maybe it's with another patron, or maybe it's with a bouncer or something like that. How does that kind of play in? I know it's the facts of the case are everything. But.
Yeah, the facts of the case it's going to be very, very fact specific. But if you're a traveling salesman and you're there and you go out to eat or go to a bar and there's an altercation there that has nothing to do with work, probably not going to be covered. If you're a traveling salesman and you're in your car. And there's a random gunfire that hits you while you're traveling down the roadway. And unfortunately, actually was a case where in Kentucky regarding this, where the salesman had gotten back into the car they'd already ate and gotten back in the car and getting ready to go to a sales call and just got shot. Nothing to do with work, just some crazy person. That shot them while they were in the car, and they said that was compensable in that setting. While he stopped to eat was somewhat of a personal mission. He was back in his car getting ready to make a sales call, so he's back on the job, so to speak. And it was a very odd situation, unfortunate, a very tragic situation, but that is compensable in that setting. So a lot of those situations, and a lot of times with traveling employees, the cases become very, very fact specific. In one little factor can make a huge difference. If the guy had been in the restaurant, it may have been a different result than in that case than getting back in the car, getting ready to get back on the road to a sales call. May have made all the difference in that case.
Well, and I've said it in previous episodes that you've got 30 years of experience of dealing with workers' compensation, these kind of cases, and it really pays to have somebody who knows what they're doing on the other side of the table when you're trying to explain, hey, here's what happened, and from your perspective, you're able to ask different questions. You're able to look for specific facts that, as a layperson, I may not realize this is actually pretty valuable to my case or my claim, but because you've been down this road, you understand what you're looking for, and you understand how to, hey, can we tie this in and make a claim out of this legitimately?
Yeah, yes, absolutely, and that is something that when I'm talking with a potential new client, some cases, obviously, it's clearly a work-related injury when you're talking about these type of cases, and violence type cases. Sometimes you have to go into greater detail on, why do you have any idea why this violence occurred? Is this somebody that you knew, and was it something that occurred between you and them that has nothing to do with work, or was it something that a coworker had a problem with them and they come in because and you were mistaken for somebody else or whatever? A variety of things that you got to explore with the person to help make a determination on whether it's compensable, and then to make sure you convey all of those facts to the insurance carrier so that they know, yes, this is a compensable claim. We should be paying the medical bills as they are incurred, and pay the person the off work benefits that they're entitled to if they're out of work because of the injury. because as you and I have talked about before, a lot of people don't have short-term disability, and a lot of people unfortunately are living paycheck to paycheck. So if they miss a couple of paychecks, it can be very, very devastating for somebody. So getting those workers' comp benefits coming in can make a difference on somebody keeping the lights on, keeping food in the grocery or in the refrigerator, or keeping a car in the driveway because they can make their car payment. So
Well, and that's the problem with workplace violence. I mean, one, it should never happen, but unfortunately, in today's society, it does with increasing frequency.
right,
And you don't plan for this stuff. It just, like other types of injuries, sometimes things just go badly.
yes,
And so, luckily for us here in Kentucky, this type of injury often is covered. And again, it takes a skilled attorney to be able to work the claim and to work the case. But the good news is the system is set up to take care of that injured worker, and that's the way it should be, I think.
yeah, exactly. It should be that way. Now, one thing we haven't kind of talked about is, and luckily I haven't seen this. I've seen it, but I haven't seen it a great deal in my 30 years of practicing. But is sometimes what you will have occur in some businesses, factories, etc., is coworkers who over time start kind of playing games, horseplay type situations,
Pranking and
pranking and doing things of that nature, and sometimes they can result in injury, be somewhat physically violent, throwing things at each other, doing stuff of that nature, and that effect can affect whether the claim is compensable or not compensable under the law in Kentucky.
how does that work? How does that work?
Well, if you engage in it, if the person who's injured is engaged in the horseplay, then the claim is not compensable from that standpoint. So if I've got a coworker that, let's say that I take a rubber band and I go up behind them and I use the rubber band and I pop them on the back or whatever it is with the rubber band, and then they come back, turn around with one and just kind of shoot it toward me, and it hits me in the eye and puts my eye out. I've engaged in the horseplay. The horseplay is what resulted in my injury, not my work activities, and so that takes it out of workers' compensation from that standpoint. Now, if I'm not engaging in that, if it's two coworkers who are doing that, and one of them shoots a rubber band at the other and it hits me instead of the other person that they were aiming at, then that's going to be compensable. So it all comes down to the person who was injured and whether that person was engaging in the horseplay or not engaging in the horseplay, and it makes a difference on not. It doesn't just matter on what you get or how much you get. It is, do you get it? Does workers' comp cover this at all, or not? So it's an all or nothing proposition.
Wow, and that's again, people like to enjoy, what's going on at work, and sometimes it's nice to have some jokes and different things with people, but sometimes they get out of hand, and somebody may just take it wrong, and suddenly it erupts and it changes. But again, this is workplace violence we're talking about, and even the case of a rubber band being shot at you technically kind of falls under workplace violence. I mean, and it's a big broad topic, and it happens. I think maybe a lot of us just don't think of it that way, but if you're injured at work, the first thing you ought to be thinking is this may be a workers' comp claim here in Kentucky, and you should pursue it.
Well, yes, you should make. I mean, if
Now,
you're
my paper cut. I mean, we don't have much to go with for that.
yeah, I mean, if you're injured at work that requires medical treatment, then the workers' comp carrier should be, if it's covered under workers' compensation, the workers' comp carrier should be the one paying those medical bills associated with that. You shouldn't have to pay copays. You shouldn't have to pay deductibles or anything else from that standpoint. And that the premiums are being paid by the employer for that coverage, and that is, it shouldn't be coming out of your pocket, because if you weren't at work, that wouldn't have happened. And so, that's the reason we have workers' comp coverage in Kentucky, is to take care of that. And if you have lost wages, they ought to be reimbursing you for that as well. In any permanent disability you may have from that, that's where what workers' compensation is for. Now, you don't get pain and suffering in workers' comp in Kentucky. The recoveries are nowhere near the same as what you recover for the same type of injuries in motor vehicle accidents, but it is workers' comp is there for a reason. And I've had clients that's come into me that's that had high deductibles, and they've been out of pocket a lot of money for treatment that they never should have been out of pocket for, because it should have been covered by workers' comp from the very beginning. It just wasn't turned in like it should have been.
That makes sense. Let me come back to something, if you don't mind. We're kind of winding down the episode. We said at the beginning that sometimes you focus on, wow, this must be a criminal case. It was a workplace violence. So let's take a convenience store worker. Okay, somebody comes in, they attack them, try to rob the place, whatever. The worker actually sustains an injury of some sort. Does the criminal case have to play out before you can file the claim, or how does that actually work? I would assume both of them are pursued, because the criminal section is handled differently and almost separate, right?
It is. It's a separate case from there, and so both can be pursued at the same time. From that, the workers' compensation claim. In fact, in that situation, the person who committed the criminal act very well may not even be called to testify at all in the workers' compensation claim. Did it occur on the job? And if we've got evidence that it occurred on the job, there's no reason to bring that person in to testify from that standpoint. A lot of times in those situations, there's no dispute that it occurred, and that it occurred while they were on the job. So those cases can be pursued easily, both at the same time from that standpoint. And the civil case, if you do have a situation where there's also a potential civil case against the perpetrator, you can pursue those to some extent at the same time. You're not going to get any testimony out of the perpetrator until the criminal case is over, because of the right to not self-incriminate. So.
That makes sense. So, I mean, there is a possibility of, again, if you've been injured, you may be incurring medical bills right there for the treatment that you have to get. So, again, why should that be out of pocket? So don't wait. I mean, I think people get nervous. Well, I'm worried my employer may retaliate against me, or I might get passed over for a promotion. And again, there's laws specific to that as well, right?
Exactly. There is laws that Kentucky prohibits an employer from retaliating against a worker because they suffer a work-related injury, because they hire an attorney, or because of a work-related injury, or pursue a workers' compensation claim. They're not allowed to retaliate against you for those reasons.
And if they do, I mean, isn't there another level of
there's a lawsuit against the employer, then for a civil lawsuit against the employer, then for damages for them for the retaliation that actually sometimes can be much more valuable than the underlying workers' compensation claim would have been.
Wow. So again, don't wait. I mean, if your family member or you as an individual have been injured on the job, especially if it involves workplace violence, go seek out a qualified attorney, somebody that has experience in handling these types of cases and knows how to approach them properly, knows how to really take on that case and step in your shoes and fight for you. I mean, I think that's important. And Jeff, you've done this for upwards of 30 years, all throughout Western Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, up in Louisville, places like that. I mean, you've practiced workers' comp across the Commonwealth. So I mean, you don't have to be located right here in Murray, in Calloway County, or over in Christian County. You've got a satellite office in Hopkinsville. How should somebody get in touch with you if they've listened to this and said, you know what, I do need somebody that can help?
Yes, the easiest and best way to get in touch with me is to call the office. The office number is 270-753-0053. If you're out of the area and want to call my 800 number, you can do that. It's 1-800-844-5108. That's the best way to get in touch with me. If the office is open, there is a live person to answer the phone, and you will speak to a live person when you call in, unless everybody's busy at that point in time and they can't answer the phone. But I will get that. If I can't talk to you right then, I'll get a message and we'll call you back as soon as I can. From that standpoint, you can also send me an email at jeff@jeffrobertslaw.com. Contact me through the website as well. But the best way to contact me is by calling the office. And usually they will get, if I've not talked to you before, they'll get information from you at that point in time, which will help us when I do talk with you to narrow in on what the issues are and get you the best answer we can for you.
No, that's fantastic. And friends, I will put the both those phone numbers in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and thinking, hey, I didn't have time to write that down, don't worry. It's there on the show notes, which are just the paragraph summaries down below the actual area that you're listening to this actual recording on. I would also encourage you, just if this episode was intriguing, or if you want to go back and look at episode 51 where we mentioned dealing with the first responders, you can always go to jeffrobertslaw.com and you'll be able to find all of that under the media tab, and there's a whole area for podcast under there. Jeff, any closing thoughts? The workplace violence, unfortunately, like we said several times during this episode, occurs with greater and greater frequency, and it's unfortunate, but that's kind of where we are right now, I guess.
Unfortunately, that's where we're at this point in time, and hopefully the pendulum will start swinging back the other direction, and we won't see it as frequently as as I'm seeing it now from that standpoint. But it's just, I hope nobody ever is a victim of violence in any form or fashion, whether it's at work or not at work, from that standpoint. But if it does occur and you're at work and you suffer and you have medical bills as a result of it, lost income as a result of it, reach out to me, reach out to another attorney, because you shouldn't be paying the co-pays, deductibles. You should not be without income when workers' comp insurance companies should be doing that. They've got the biggest insurer in Kentucky makes millions and millions of profits every year, and if you're injured, you need to be getting what you're entitled to under Kentucky law.
Absolutely. Jeff, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. Good to see you again.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.